Good morning. To Secretary Rice, Phil Knight of Nike, the other business leaders who are here, and the labor leaders, leaders of other organizations who are concerned about this issue, to Kathie Lee Gifford and Congressman George Miller, who was just here and had to leave. I want to say a special word of thanks to my friend Senator Tom Harkin, who's the very first person who ever discussed the issue we'll be talking about today with me. Before I begin, I'd like to say just a brief word about the new job figures. It was reported this morning that our economy produced nearly 200,000 more new jobs in July. Further good news for the American people that our economy is growing and creating good jobs. Thanks to the hard work of employees and businesses here in our country, we now have the economic equivalent of our dream team. Strong growth, millions of jobs, low inflation, low unemployment, and growing incomes. That's the lineup we want for America. I've just had a very productive meeting with representatives of some of our nation's largest apparel and footwear companies, as well as representatives of labor, consumer, human rights, and religious groups. They all accepted my invitation to meet here today to deal with an issue that is rightly on the minds of millions of American consumers. Just a year ago today, the discovery of more than 70 people working in virtual slavery behind barbed wire in a garment factory in El Monte, California, awakened Americans to the fact that some of the clothes and shoes they buy are manufactured by people who work under deplorable conditions. The well-documented episode involving Kathie Lee Gifford also awakened many people to this problem. We all are outraged by these awful revelations, but as leaders we have a responsibility to do something about them. When Kathie Lee learned that some of the garments with her name on them were being produced under terrible working conditions, she didn't bury her head in the sand. Instead, she reacted quickly, decisively, and responsibly. That's what all the rest of us must do as well. Our nation has always stood for human dignity and the fundamental rights of working people. We believe everyone should work, but no one should have to put their lives or health in jeopardy to put food on the table for their families. That's why I am pleased to announce that the companies gathered here today have agreed to begin working together to put an end to this terrible problem. They have agreed to do two things. First, they will take additional steps to ensure that the products they make and sell are manufactured under decent and humane working conditions. Second, they will develop options to inform consumers that the products they buy are not produced under those exploitative conditions. They have agreed to report back to me within a maximum of 6 months about their progress. Human and labor rights are not brand names. They are the most basic products of our democracy. I want to compliment the companies that are here: Phyllis Van Heusen, LL Bean, Patagonia, Nicole Miller, Karen Kane, Warnaco, Tweeds, and of course Frank and Kathie Lee Gifford, Liz Claiborne, and Nike, companies that have pledged to live up to their responsibilities. And I want to see the results they produce. The ultimate test of their commitment will be for them to produce tough criteria to make sure that sweatshops are not used and to make sure consumers know it. And then what we want to do is to persuade others in this country to follow their lead and to find ways to make sure, again, that consumers know it. I don't know what final strategies they will come up with. I do hope they'll develop measures that might include labels, clear signs in stores, or other means of getting the information directly involved to consumers, so that consumers at the point of sale have an opportunity themselves to be responsible citizens in their purchases. This is a good start. As I've said before, we know that the first job of business is to produce a profit. That is the foundation of our free enterprise system. But for the system to succeed, good corporations must also be good citizens. Our success in the 21st century depends more than ever on the right kind of partnership between all of us to make America the place it ought to be and to set a standard for the entire world. We're already working with the high-tech community to put computers in schools, with the media and entertainment industry to rate television programs. Today we are embarking on a new partnership. I hope that it will become a vital part of the battle against sweatshops here in the United States and against abusive working conditions, and particularly child labor, everywhere in the world. Thank you. Secretary Rice?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very short. 3 years ago, when we began our campaign in this country against sweatshops, our most formidable adversaries were three little words, and I heard them a lot. Not my problem. I heard them from manufacturers, I heard them from others in the industry, I heard them from advertisers, but you know, things have changed. Today, we are here with industry leaders of major garment and footwear companies, leaders who are stepping forward to say that sweatshops and abusive labor conditions are everyone's problem, and that it's everybody's responsibility to be part of a solution to that problem. Now, as the President mentioned, exactly 1 year ago today, we discovered in El Monte, California, sweatshop conditions that were among the most abusive we have discovered in the United States. Americans were shocked to learn about what was going on behind the barbed wire of that garment factory. And they were frustrated that they had absolutely no way of knowing whether or not the clothes they buy were made under those kinds of conditions. Now, 1 year later, leaders in the fashion industry say they are ready to step up to the plate and give consumers the kind of information they want and they need. Now, let me now introduce two people, industry leaders, who are willing to face that test. With us today are Phil Knight, President and Chief Executive Officer of Nike, and Kathie Lee Gifford. Let me ask Phil to make a few remarks first. Phil?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the President of the United States for inviting Nike to be a part of this coalition. It shows a certain magnanimity, as I think many of you know, that for the last 6 months, Nike has actively and aggressively promoted Ken Griffey Jr. for President of the United States. Nike is 25 years old next summer. That we compete in an industry that's made up of 50 or 60 different competitors who have that competition go on around the world in 85 different countries. They also source around the world. And around the world means just that what isn't probably very well known is that Nike sources 60% of its apparel in the United States, and it has over 2,000 shoe workers in the United States. That we have always believed that quality product is important to our success, and we believe that quality products are made in quality factories. For the last 5 years, we have had a code of conduct that basically is set out to ensure that subcontractors follow fair labor practices and in good factory conditions. That code of conduct has been monitored by over 800 inspectors that we have throughout the world, as well as Ernst & Young, certified public accountants, who monitor on a random basis factories mostly in Asia. But while I think that we've been good citizens within our industry, I think there's clearly a lot more that we can do, that we can indeed be better. I think that in addition to that, Americans would like to have assurances that their products are made without child labor and outside of abusive conditions. And I think this coalition that had its first meeting today can be a positive step in giving them that assurance. Thank you.
I think I'm okay as long as I pull this down. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I think the amazing thing about my participation in all of this, standing here in the Rose Garden, just being a part of this, is the fact that I basically represent every private citizen in our country who has felt over the past few years an overwhelming, perhaps the word, helplessness about the problems that we face in our world and in our country. Very few of us get an opportunity to do something about those problems. Very few of us get a chance to be part of the empowerment process. And that, for me, has been a thrill. If anyone would have said to me 3 months ago when the first allegations came about that there were abuses involving my clothing line, that within 3 months I would be thrilled to be a part of the process, I might have done something criminal to them. But the truth is, I'm here and I feel honored to be a part of it. I hear from people every day, thousands and hundreds of thousands of Americans who send me $1 or $5 for the little houses Frank and I are building in New York for AIDS and crack babies because they feel overwhelmed by the problems. And they feel that in giving me $1 or $5 for our little houses, they're doing something. They're part of the solution. And that has been overwhelming to me as well, and very gratifying to see the reaction of the American public, and I've heard from so many of them. But I'm responsible for what I say and what I do and what I put my name on. And when it was discovered that one blouse and one pair of pants were being manufactured under abusive conditions, that was one blouse and one pant too many. I am the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants who taught me that this is the greatest country in the world, and to whom much is given, much is required. When Mrs. Clinton came to New York just a few weeks ago to help us dedicate Cassidy's place, she did a great, great personal favor to Frank and me. In the midst of our so-called scandal, she was a friend, and she knew of the work that we'd been doing, and I'm very grateful to her for that. And those houses would not have been possible unless I had had a little clothing line. Started out little, got big, and it made a lot of money to help a lot of kids in New York. And it's our hope and our goal, and Mrs. Clinton has promised to help us with this, that these houses will be possible in other cities around the country where crack and AIDS are such a problem. So in the midst of the so-called scandal, great good was being done. Hot goods legislation was passed in Albany in New York under Governor Pataki's leadership that we were proud to be a part of. So I guess the message that I'm bringing today is that I'm committed with our president and our vice president and with Labor Secretary Reich, who has been such a leader in this. I'm committed, as well as my husband, is to do all we can to ensure the fact that whatever our name is on, it is made with integrity and with great respect for not just the American worker, but any worker anywhere in the world that toils and labors, and we reap a profit from it. As long as there is greed in the world, the problems will remain. As long as there is $1 to be made by somebody on the back of somebody else's work, somebody will try to make it. But that's what we're all here about today, to make sure that there's a watchdog organization in place, that we can find these people and weed them out and restore the good name to this industry that we all fight very hard for and work very hard for. I'm proud to be a part of the process. It's been an empowering experience for me. It's been a character-building one. I'm more proud than ever to be the daughter of immigrants, granddaughter of immigrants, and more proud than ever to be an American. Thank you.
Well, I just want to, first of all, thank the President. I want to thank Secretary Reich for the last 3 years of his investigative work of looking into the problem of child labor throughout the world and issuing the reports that sort of brought this out of the shadows and into the sunlight. I want to thank you, Mr. President, for convening this group today. I believe the only way we're going to stop the scourge of child labor around the world is through a voluntary association of the businesses that are represented here today. And we look forward to working with you, and I look forward to working with them to establish the kind of voluntary standards that will enable us to end this scourge of child labor. You know, we started this century in America, we Americans did, by starting to put an end to child labor in this country. Under the leadership of President Clinton, we can close out this century by taking the leadership to end child labor around the world. I thank you for that, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'm very gratified that it is law. And I think that it's going to be the law of the land in no small measure because we have had this health care issue on the agenda now for 3.5 years. And frankly, because Senator Kennedy's been fighting for it for 20 years, ever since his own son was taken ill as a young boy. I was talking with Senator Rockefeller, who is also one of our longtime leaders, about this morning. As you know, I also recommended in my budget that we take steps to provide for the possibility of coverage for people who suffer long periods of unemployment when they're in between jobs and when their insurance that they have associated with their previous job expires. And so I think that is the next step. And I think what we should do, and I still believe the goal that I had to have a system that provides everybody with the opportunity to have health insurance coverage, that emphasizes preventive health, that keeps inflation in health care at about the general rate of inflation, that these are good and honorable goals, and I think we're going to have to meet them in a sort of a step-by-step basis. And I think that when we get Kennedy-Kassebaum in place and see how it works, the new changes may tell us what the next steps are, but I think we should begin to focus on the problems of unemployed families. And as I said, I've already tried to address this to some extent in my budget. Yes.
When do you plan to sign?
Jill?
What can you tell us about these reports of terrorist training camps in Iran, and what, if anything, do you plan to do about it?
Well, first of all, there are terrorist training camps in more than one country in the world, and we are aware of many of them in many countries. The question here is whether who was responsible for the killing of the American servicemen in Saudi Arabia. And keep in mind, we cannot confirm. I was asked a question by a young man this morning. We cannot confirm yet what the cause of the TWA crash was, and until we can, we shouldn't speculate. But we know that our servicemen in Saudi Arabia were killed by a terrorist attack. Who was responsible for that? Who supported them in that, and was any nation involved in that? These are the questions we have to ask and answer. The speculation or even the existence of actual terrorist training camps do not answer those specific questions. And so until I'm in a position to tell the American people the answer to those questions, I think I should tell you what I've said all along. Our country has taken a tough line against terrorism. We want our allies to help us. We want to have the tools we need here at home to prevent as many attacks as possible and then to punish people who carry them out. We want to make airline safety as safe as we possibly can, and that's what we're working on. And then when we find people who have done things that are wrong, we will do our best to bring them to justice, as you have seen in the successful trials and convictions in the World Trade Center bombing and the trial going on involving the Oklahoma City bombing. Yes, sir. Well, one more.
Concerned that your trade representative was unable to get an agreement on insurance with Japan despite your Wednesday deadline?
Well, frankly, I'm elated that we got a semiconductor agreement. That is a very, very big issue and very important for us because of the enormous comeback American industries had in that area. I thought we would get an insurance agreement. I still think we can. We're really not all that far away, and I think we need to keep working at it. But I want to congratulate Ambassador Barshevsky on getting the semiconductor agreement, and I know that the people in that industry in America, and there are many, many thousands of good jobs involved in this, are very happy today. Sarah?
Tested for psychiatric conditions, and isn't some of this coming out from after they get out of the services and they are unhappy about things, then they create bombs? Our research shows that that's happening.
For one thing, it is necessary that people in our military understand fundamentals. The people in the appropriate units in the military understand the fundamentals of how bombs are made and how they can be diffused, and the technology of it. And of course, I think that the people in the military do the best they can to make sure that the rigorous training program that people go through would sort out those who are unsuited. It is true that some of the people who have the knowledge necessary to cause problems for us domestically, in instances of domestic terrorism, have been in the military. But I don't know that we can compellingly say that there's any higher percentage of people who are mentally unbalanced who've been in the military than any other group, and I don't know that there's any sort of screening process that the military could adopt that would protect against that. That is something that I think that's one of the ongoing questions they're always asking themselves whenever we have an incident, not just involving a bomb, but if there's something else that a soldier does or a veteran does that may seem tied to his or her military service, they look at that, and but I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. Mara?
Senator Moynihan yesterday.
With this Congress, welfare reform, minimum wage, Kennedy Casadon, isn't this an argument to keep things the way they are with you in the White House, Republicans in the majority, and Democrats in the minority in Congress?
I think it's, first of all, it's come like pulling teeth right here before the election. And it's only come after the American people showed that they were bitterly opposed to the extremism that was the want of the Congress. So, you know, if the American people, of course, will have to make up their minds, but basically what we did with the health initiative and the minimum wage were plainly Democratic initiatives, as well as the major environmental initiatives. In welfare, the two parties essentially came together finally. Otherwise, we would have had a totally unacceptable bill. So the American people can make up their minds. I think what they've seen is that all the things that were said about the Democrats aren't true. The Democrats have turned out to be fiscally responsible, strong on defense, strong on foreign policy, strong on welfare, strong on crime, strong on management of the economy, and good for health care and education and working families. So it seems to me that our party in Congress ought to feel good about going out and presenting an image of a modern 21st century progressive party, and then let the American people make up their mind whether they agree with their philosophy or the philosophy of the other party. That's what the election will be about. Thank you.
Will you sign Kennedy Casadon before going on vacation?
Absolutely. They always are. I don't have any uni-party signing ceremonies where there are bipartisan support. Absolutely. I didn't. I'm glad that they voted for it. They absolutely do. Anybody who supported any of these measures deserves credit for it. I was just answering Mara's question in the other context. They absolutely do, and I applaud them for doing it. I'm tickled pink that they did it, and I applaud them.
Too much of a shop there, was it? Jackie, did you drop that lens cap thing there? Yeah, mine. Thanks. Yep. Here it goes. Yep.
About 500 volts. And this one is what we do.